Hello and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. 32 foreign ministers have begun arriving in Brussels for the start of a two-day NATO talks. Increasing military spending and shoring up support for Ukraine sit at the top of the agenda. But many expect the behind-the-scenes chatter spearheaded by U.S. envoy Marco Rubio to be the item to watch. Our correspondent Angela Skujins is in the Belgian capital. Hello, Angela. So what can we expect from today's meeting, and particularly also what can you tell us about what Marco Rubio's spearheaded chatter is going to be about? Do we have any details on that?
Yes, so the item to watch is that US envoy Marco Rubio meeting with the Danish foreign minister. That will be happening on the sidelines of this two-day NATO ministerial occurring in Brussels. We just heard remarks from that US representative, Marco Rubio. It was a short speech, but it was powerful. He said that the US President Donald Trump was not against the NATO military alliance. However, he would like those members to reach their 2% of GDP funding benchmark. Now, he has just gone into high-level talks, but he also was buffeted by questions from reporters, as well as those other 32 foreign ministers. Almost everyone here today was asking whether the US is a stable partner for the EU in light of that rhetoric that we heard from US President Donald Trump about Europe needing to stand on its own 2 feet in terms of its own defensive needs, as well as tariffs. Of course, we heard the 47th President of the United States last night announce that he would slap 20% tariffs on all imported goods into the US. Let's take a listen to what the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had to say when he was asked this very question at a press conference this morning.
I think the reception will be very positive. This is not a meeting about, of course, the economic issues and subjects. We are really focused. The focus here of all 32 is how to defend NATO territory against the Russians, our long-term threat, which will be there even after, I hope, there will be a deal on Ukraine. The Russian threat will be there for many years to come. We are seeing what China is doing. We're seeing how these two theaters, the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic, are getting more and more connected by the fact that the Russians are working together with the North Koreans, with the Chinese, with the mullahs in Iran. So we have to look at all these theaters in conjunction, and that will be our focus.
Yes, so while we are watching these behind-the-scenes talks between Denmark as well as Washington, the official agenda has scaling up defence spending as well as shoring up support to Ukraine. We know that the EU High Representative Kaja Kallas will be lobbying those foreign ministers to buy into her military initiative to support Kyiv on the front lines. So far, that plan consists of at least 2 million rounds of ammunition to support the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the battlefield, as well as at the negotiating table with those ceasefire negotiations. But there are press conferences scheduled throughout the day as well as tomorrow. That's all from me. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
Thank you so much, Angela Skujins, coming to us live from the NATO Foreign Ministers Summit in Brussels. We will be coming back to you throughout the day for those important updates. Thanks for being with us here. President Donald Trump escalated his global trade war on Wednesday, slapping sweeping tariffs on imports from allies and foes alike. Now, while some countries will face a 10% baseline tariff, the European Union will be hit with 20%. Additional levies were imposed on approximately 60 countries deemed, quote, the worst offenders by Trump as payback for what he called unfair trade policies.
During his speech on Wednesday, Trump displayed a chart listing the countries subject to higher tariffs, with the European Union, China, and Vietnam facing rates of 20%, 54%, and 46% respectively. Other countries in what Trump called the worst offenders group were Japan and Taiwan. These duties will go into effect on April 9th. But other allies will also face new tariffs, including a 10% base rate for the UK. Other countries in this group include Singapore, Brazil, Australia, and New Zealand. The White House said the US would start charging the 10% tariffs on April 5th. The 10% baseline rate does not apply to Canada and Mexico, as they have already been targeted. The pre-existing 25% tariffs on most Mexican and Canadian goods will remain in place. President Trump also confirmed the beginning of a new American 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles, which went into effect almost immediately at midnight local time.
Now we look into some of the responses to those tariffs, starting with commentary by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in the early hours of Thursday morning. Now, the leader said that the European Union is preparing for further countermeasures against a new wave of U.S. tariffs.
We have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses if negotiations fail. We will also be watching closely what indirect effects these tariffs could have, because we cannot absorb global overcapacity, nor will we accept dumping on our markets. And Europe will stand at the side of those directly impacted. We have already announced new measures to support the steel and cars sectors. Last week, we limited the amount of steel that can be imported to Europe tariff-free. This will give more breathing space to these strategic industries. Now, we will also convene strategic dialogues with the steel, the automotive and the pharmaceutical sectors, and others will follow. Europe stands together.
Reactions to new tariffs imposed by Donald Trump are coming in from all across the European Union. Among the first to share their opinions on the new levies were Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, along with his Swedish and Italian counterparts.
Friendship means partnership. Partnership means really and truly reciprocal tariffs. Adequate decisions are needed. It is free enterprise and free competition that have laid the foundation for the prosperity of the West. That is why Americans can listen to music on Swedish Spotify and we Swedes can listen to the same music on American iPhones. Therefore, I deeply regret that the US has now embarked on a path where it wants to restrict trade through increased tariffs. Full support for the EU Commission in trade negotiations with the US. Trade is a powerful engine of global prosperity. The EU will remain the staunch advocate for free and fair trade. We will engage with all our partners and continue to strengthen and expand our trade network. Now is the time to ratify the agreements with Mercosur, Mexico, and decisively advance in the negotiations with India and other key partners.
The introduction by the US of tariffs against the European Union is a measure that I consider to be wrong and not in the interests of either party. We will do everything we can to work on an agreement with the United States, with the aim of averting a trade war that would inevitably weaken the West in favor of other global players. In any case, as always, we will act in the interests of Italy and its economy, including by engaging with our other European partners.
Well, there are no winners in trade wars, and it's clear that all these tariffs will raise prices for the consumers, and in the end, we get to pay for everything. So, of course, the defense cooperation that we have with the Americans is also very important. And when we have the white paper, then we are also thinking about what more can we do for our own defense industry, because we are buying a lot from the Americans right now, but we need to diversify our portfolio so that we would have capabilities to produce here the ammunition and things we need here, and also to be able to buy from other allies so that we have a diversified portfolio in this regard.
We're now turning to the Polish capital here in Warsaw, where European ministers of defense have arrived for an informal summit. Now, the ministers' gathering at the Warsaw Citadel is set to focus on future support for Kyiv and the EU's role in securing a lasting peace in Ukraine. The officials have already begun discussing an initiative by Kaja Kallas meant to strengthen the Ukrainian army. Now, the proposal involves sending Kyiv 2 million rounds of large-caliber ammunition worth some 5 billion euros by the end of the year. The agenda of today's meeting also includes a working lunch on the White Paper for European Defence, which provides the EU with a roadmap for the bloc's rearmament.
We have secured the first part of the budget, which will take the form of a very favorable loans. Commissioner Kubilius will encourage countries to work together to make joint purchases. One thing he made very clear yesterday is that these moves, the creation of a European defense budget, support for the development of our defense industry, security investments, are for NATO, not in opposition to NATO. They are not meant to curtail sovereignty, but to defend it. I want to dispel doubts that have been voiced in political statements by those who have long presented a hostile stance toward the European Union. This is intended to strengthen our independence and sovereignty. Armed forces will remain under the purview of individual states. That is not up for debate.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in Budapest for a meeting with his Hungarian counterpart Viktor Orbán. Now, Netanyahu is wanted by the International Criminal Court, received a red carpet welcome in Hungary. Soldiers secured his arrival, and the Israeli leader was greeted by Hungarian officials. Now, Netanyahu and Orbán are to hold a press conference on Thursday. The Israeli Prime Minister is expected to stay in Hungary for 4 days. Now, the visit comes despite an arrest warrant after Netanyahu over allegations of war crimes in Gaza. Now, as a founding member of the International Criminal Court, Budapest is theoretically obliged to arrest Netanyahu. However, on Thursday, Hungary announced it will withdraw from the ICC. And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching, and do stay tuned with us for more news and features.